In February 1940, you, Sunday afternoon, turn on the radio, kick back before the rat race begins again on Monday. Listen to CBS. They got a program called The Pursuit of Happiness. You might have heard of it. Paul Robeson, in January 1940, sang the Ballad of the Americans. In February 1940, Kurt Weill and Maxwell Anderson, they sang the Ballad of Magna Carta. A week later, Woody Guthrie wrote his song, This Land is Your Land. This land is my land. These are the breakthroughs of 1940. Magna Carta was agreed to, so now, Al, I come to the robber barons. Magna Carta was agreed to in June 1215 in England. Bad King John, he was the robber baron. He went around pulling the teeth from Jews, one tooth a week, until they gave him all their money. He went around taking people's forest lands. He would take your cart for himself. Magna Carta was an armistice ending a civil war. It was a kind of a social contract between church and monarchy, between king and barons, between the individual and the state, between town and country, between Christian and Jew, between husband and wife, between common and privatizer. And during an era of worldwide competition for commodity trade in the Mediterranean and of Christian crusades against the Islam and Jewish infidels of Jerusalem, it was part of the process of centralizing monarchy, centralizing a war machine. And it was also a time of the birth of the bourgeoisie in Europe and of vast heretical movements. Magna Carta has 63 chapters. It used to be that the 39th chapter was known by every school child. That's the most well-known. You'll find it in old courthouses. Perhaps some of you had to take Latin, will remember it. It's the one from which habeas corpus is derived. It's the one from which the prohibition of torture is derived. It's the one that provides for trial by jury. It's the one that has the expression due process of law. These four provisions of Magna Carta were systematically not forgotten and destroyed after 2001. Hey, you can run a good seminar based on these 63 chapters. I'm not saying it's going to be amusing and entertaining. But by the time those 2 hours is up in your seminar, and you've gone around the room, everyone reading one of the chapters, they're very short, a line or two, and commented on it and tried to figure out what it's meant, you'll have a very good grounding. And you will not be isolationist in the way that Franklin Roosevelt was fearful that we'd become. It's just a tip. Me and Mike Ratner started talking about it a few years ago, of the Center for Constitutional Rights. And now the Supreme Court is talking and remembering Magna Carta. And it's thanks to Michael Ratner, who got the pro bono work from the corporate firms to take on the Guantanamo cases. We've yet to deal with torture. We've yet to deal with snooping. We've yet to deal... Let me get back to the story. The robber baron, Bad King John, he had his fingers crossed. As soon as he got out of there, Runnymede it is, it's an island on the River Thames. I don't know if you can see the cover to this book, but here on the right side is Bad King John, the king of the robber barons. To get to the place on the Thames where he had to agree to Magna Carta, some worker took him over there. He's over on the left. You can see this fantastic mural over in the old Cuyahoga County Courthouse building in Cleveland. When you're driving out to the Midwest, further in the Midwest, or driving out to the West Coast, stop there in Cleveland. Have a look. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. Joe, and it puts the workers right there. All right? In memory of the homestead workers. Where was I? Yes, he reneged on it as soon as he got out of there, and the Pope backed him up. The Civil War began again. And the Magna Carta was lost. Bad King John dropped dead. And here's the story of how he died, as the peasants told it to themselves a century later, and as William Morris remembered it, and I learned it from William Morris. King John was riding along, oppressing his people, with a huge train of baggage, which got lost when the tide came up in a place on the English coast called the Wash. His luggage got lost in the Wash. He was cold and infuriated. He went to the nearest abbey. Open up! And they opened up and said, here's a robe. Come down by the fire and we'll make you dinner, sire. And he said, he bellowed out, how much is this loaf of bread? They said, it's 1 penny, sire. Well, before I'm finished, it'll be worth 12 pence. And at that point, there was a young monk nearby who considered to himself that his time had come. Can you hear me back there? Yeah. Would you like dessert? And the monk went out into the orchard and plucked a plum and then another. He took out the pits and put venom inside instead. He brought the plums back to His Majesty, who looked at him cunningly and said, you eat first, monk. And so the monk ate. And then the king ate. The monk turned blue and perished on the floor. And the king did the same. And that was the end of bad King John. Suicide bombing, see? And the plums are from the Middle East. They're not indigenous to England. They were brought back by crusaders from Syria, I believe. And that's not all. They wanted to find the Magna Carta. And they found it on the 11th of September, 1217. But it had been changed. Now, the 5th chapter of Magna Carta provided in it estovers, provided the widows reasonable estovers in the common. Here's where we've got to do a little work. Estovers. What does estovers mean? I'll tell you in a minute. Not only was the big charter found, but a little charter came with it. And that little charter is the Charter of the Forest. And ever since, the two charters have gone together, like a big and a little sister. It's when Magna Carta got its name. Magna means big charter. But it's with the Charter of the Forest, which provided for pannage for the commoner, provided for chiminage for the commoner. There's a whole nomenclature of the commons, of the forest commons. Estovers just means you can... See, back then their hydrocarbon energy resource was not based on coal, the way it was once in Pittsburgh. Their hydrocarbon energy resources was not based on oil, the way it is for us. You couldn't. Your clothes, our furniture, our cars, our transport, our housing, even our food now with new fertilizers is based on this hydrocarbon energy resource of petroleum.